All right, now we have the panel Big Things in Small Packages Sound for Mobile. In some ways, you can think of this panel as the gas of video game music composition because it fills whatever space that it's in. So in some ways, it's the biggest thing, but it can go in a small package, yeah? Science? No one cared for that one. That's okay. All right, we tried. Joining me on the stage today, we have Katarzyna Wiktorski, who is a Polish-Australian pianist and composer, Jayde Marter, who is the audio director at Pickpock, and John Guscott, who is the audio lead at Playside Studios. We're going to be discussing the challenges, strengths, and creative solutions needed for creating music and sound design for mobile games. Remember, this is one where Slido is going to be poppin'. So get in there, ask your questions. You can upvote ones that you like that you also want to ask. And I had no end to that. And if you don't know how to get there, the QR code is on the back of your lanyard. But to kick us off, I would like to get you to each introduce yourselves a little bit more and talk about some of the things that you've worked on and some of the expertise that you bring to the table so people can get to know you. Kat, let's start with you.
Hello. So I've worked on one game called Gubbins by Studio Folly. And I mostly work on creating music for live performance. As you said, I'm a pianist and composer. I've been studying here in Melbourne. I finished the jazz and improvisation course a couple of years ago. So I've been mostly working on creating new music, working towards my next album. I made an album back in 2020 remotely. I'm just trying to get some more work. That's about it.
Aren't we all?
The forever quest.
Yeah. Jayde.
Kia ora everyone. My name is Jayde, like you've already heard and saw. I'm the audio director at Pickpock Games in Wellington. We've got 200 and so of us working there. We've got an audio team of 5, including myself and composers and sound designers. My background, I've been there 10 years now. My background before that, I worked in theatre. I did a lot of sound design and composition for theatre, and I also was a music producer, aspiring music producer, failing music producer for a long time, and I got into Pickpock Games, and they've never had a sound designer before, so they just kind of threw me in and said, go do sound design, and now I'm very lucky to have a team of 5. We've got 5 studios, we've got half of a floor in Wellington, New Zealand, and some of the titles I've worked on is Into the Dead 2, which is by far our most popular game, well over 100 million downloads. And we wrote the theme song to that, Nails, which was streamed and played for over 10 million streams, which is really exciting for us because it was very different for the mobile world back then for music to take off like that. So I've got an awesome team and really excited to talk to you all today.
Hi there, everyone. Oh, that's quite loud. My name's John. I'm the audio lead at Playside, right here in Melbourne. There's about 300 plus people now who work for Playside. It's a company that's grown a lot in the last year or two. There's 6 audio designers now, plus myself. We have an audio programmer as well, and a producer who helps out with audio-related production stuff, and Playside has grown a lot, originally from being a studio known for its mobile titles into a studio that now does mobile as well as a whole bunch of other things in different divisions and platforms. So yeah, it does a bit of everything there. Mobile is still a very important part of the business, of course, and before Playside, I worked fairly recently with a company called Studio Dry Dock and did a mobile game called Wildflowers on the Apple Arcade originally, and then it went to Switch as well, where I was audio director and composer on that project. Before that, I worked for a virtual reality company called Zero Latency, who are still around in Melbourne, who do VR experiences. So a little bit different from the mobile space, but before that I worked for Gree in Melbourne as well, who made a big budget mobile game that then didn't actually get released, but it was a big thing in Melbourne for a while. It came and went, and that was a really interesting experience actually, especially learning about the mobile space and how everything was sort of authored and put together on a really, really big mobile project. I've also worked with indies on mobile games, and previously to that have worked for a number of game studios, usually in an in-house capacity as a composer and sound designer.
Well, that's a beautiful place to start, because I'd love if you could give us a bit of an overview of how mobile games is currently sitting, I guess, within the wider industry, where it's been, and also where you think it might be headed. We'll start with you, John. Yeah,
it's a really interesting question, because where mobile has been and where it's going are, it's now in an incredible space that was very, very different to just a few short years ago. And I speak really about mobile games in general and also audio for mobile games. So when I started doing audio for mobile games, it was all about small download sizes. The content had to be kind of very snappy and was often limited in scope due to memory restrictions and performance of the devices. And the way that mobile games were monetized was mostly in the kind of freemium space. So free to install, and then you'd have in-app purchases which would be optional. So a lot of the audio design for that kind of game would lead itself to trying to kind of appeal attractive to users in the way that the sound effects would work or would signify either progress or purchasing as well, because you'd be sort of like buying custom goods inside the game or leveling up or what have you. So that was really the kind of like the main business model for most of the entire industry. And I guess when you moved more into advert-generated games, that would change things a little bit. But more recently, there's been this incredible expansion into the world of like fully fledged premium games, which I know really there's a lot less restrictions now on size and technical restraints, and the content has just completely exploded in terms of sheer volume. And all that operates alongside the traditional kind of freemium model. So there's just a whole different set of business models in which mobile games now operate, and audio has had to kind of adapt and expand along with those changes. Do you have anything else to add there, Jayde?
Yeah, just jumping on that point that you said about the size thing there. When I started, a game was 50 megabytes, and we would be lucky to get 10% of that budget for our entire audio for the game. So you're looking at 5 megs if you're lucky, and then we're doing that at 22 kilohertz mono, and you just cry every time you hear your sound.
I was gonna say, yuck.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. But now, size now, like Rival Stars Horse Racing, one of our most popular games, we have a full commentary system in there now, and the game is almost 1.2 gig. And so we've got the biggest difference is just the sheer size and how powerful devices are, and they're only getting more and more powerful. I think to the point now where you can almost use them as a console. I think that we're one step away that you can just plug it into your TV, and that's your new console. So the biggest difference for us has been the size, and also to your point about the celebratory stuff that we used to make back then. It kind of, if you listen to it now, it feels kind of gross because it was kind of casino-y, and but now it's we've just gotten better at doing things, and there's a little less push for that. So it's all we're creating huge bespoke soundtracks that you would do for. We like to say that we try to do AAA audio for mobile games, and that's what we try and push at Pickpock. And just to get that quality level there, there's a level now that is at the level of AAA level style soundtracks in a mobile title. And people go, well, why? People don't play with mobile games with their sound on. And I say, well, give them a reason to turn it on. That's kind of what we've been saying. We've got some stats like most people in mobile world used to only 20% would play with their sound on. Like our games are well over 50. And that's against a lot of the norms because we gave them a reason to. So if you ever get a PO or a producer that says that, it's like nobody ever plays with sound on. It's like, well, give them a reason to.
I think that's a great point about the changes in technology as well, because this is a more graphical thing, but now phones are doing ray tracing and things like that, which is bonkers. It's a little bit crazy, and then you've got things like, not to do an ad, but like Samsung's flip phones that you can basically use as a little laptop and connect it to TVs. So it's a really exciting space in that these technological advances seem to be coming, thick and fast. So one of the questions we have from Slido is, does increase in game size help or hinder audio design for mobile?
Hello? Oh, definitely helps.
I was hoping
Massively.
we get a bit of controversy. It was like,
No. More space, better.
It's mind-boggling how big games now are on mobile. I mean, Wildflowers that I worked on last year, the install size is 4 gig, and that's the absolute maximum that Apple will allow. I mean, something like 15 to 18 hours of dialogue, hours of music, interactive. It was huge. I mean, it wasn't a huge game graphically, less necessarily in terms of animation or what have you, but the sheer scope of the volume of the audio was just vast. I mean, there was like 30 voice acted characters, very, very narrative heavy. So the shift towards narrative games in mobile is really, really interesting. And I think the subscription services like Netflix games and Apple Arcade have just opened up this incredible world of being able to make that kind of game on mobile. And as Jayde said, the technical specs now are so impressive that if you make a game on the Apple devices that also has to work on Apple TV, you're almost in the console world anyway. And if you compare it to something like a Nintendo Switch, which also the game I worked on last year also came out on the Switch, I actually prefer playing it on the iPhone because the speakers now are better. Like if you listen to the audio coming out of an iPhone 14, it's not bad. I mean, it's the Switch speakers sound a bit crappy to my ears in terms of like they're more tinny and they don't have as much oomph, for want of a better word. So the device is now really impressive. And the other thing we haven't talked about is the kind of increase of using Bluetooth headphones. I think that's been a really big thing in mobile, and I just don't buy the kind of idea that people have always said, oh, mobile games, you play with your sound off. So many games now, you couldn't do that even if you wanted to, but you wouldn't even want to,
Did either? Well, okay. One of the common ideas in creative fields, though, is that restriction produces creativity. You don't feel that in terms of size?
I guess because of one of the old dogs, is that the initiatives and stuff that we built and we did in the mobile world to try and make games work on 50 megabytes, we still bring that into our world now. So we can pack a lot more into 1.6 or 4 gig because we have all these things that we've been able to bring across into that world, been able to... so yes, limitation does create, just does help with the creativity from that side of this because we're trying to jam more in. We're trying to get more in. So like fully in procedurally generated music systems into a mobile game. So it's constantly evolving all the time. So the music is just constantly changing. So every time you play the game, the music's different, but it works with the mood of the title, the mood of the game, what's happening, and just totally evolves all the way down to the drum beats that are programmed, but they're not programmed, they just happen randomly in there. So it's all generative. So like 5 years ago, that was not even a thing that we would try. But now it's just bring that into we're doing a PC game at the moment, and so we bring everything that we've learned from mobile, and it just really helps us be able to build these incredible worlds. and the coders love us because we're not taking up all their space and just making them cry and going, turn that off. Yeah.
Kat, oh yeah, you.
I was just going to make a comment about the people don't listen to music with when they're playing games. I did get a very gentle disclaimer about that coming into working on Gubbins. I just had to ignore that and just hope that, you know, if anyone is going to listen, then it's going to be a nice gift for them. So, you know, with the Bluetooth comment, I hope that's true. Who listens to music with it when they're playing mobile games? There you go. Okay. There's hope. There's hope.
They become die-hard fans too. Because if they're listening to it, they become die-hard fans. And they just love everything about what you're doing. And that's one thing I really like about the mobile world. When they're a fan of your game, they're in there.
Yeah.
I think as well that there is still a space for mobile games to serve that purpose of just playing on the tram without listening. I mean, that's fine. It's just that the mobile market has expanded so much into exciting new areas in addition to that. And also just going back to what Jayde was saying about restrictions or technical stuff, like we still need to optimize the hell out of our mobile games. Like we can't, like it is really important still to keep the size down, like because user acquisition is still such an important thing in mobile. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but I believe that Apple have only just recently upped their binaries limit from 150 meg to 200 meg. So your initial install can be 200, but for years it was like 150 meg for an entire game before the user would then download additional content. So when authoring the game, you'd set that up so that the first level or the tutorial would be within your initial downsize. So the FTUI, right, the first time user experience would be enticing the user in, and then once you've kind of engaged them, you'd then download the rest. So we still get heat from our technical directors and producers about file size, and there's still that kind of thing about trying to keep it optimized as possible. And for me personally, I started out many moons ago working on consoles where RAM was still a luxury that we didn't have, limitless supply of. So working with different sample rates and really being aware of how much kind of RAM you're taking up was very much an issue on a daily basis. And I think working in the mobile space reminds me, well, it did initially, of those days of having to work with potentially cut down sample rates occasionally, and just being aware of how long your samples are and how long or short your loops are and everything. But in the last year or two, I've worked on a game, again, going back to that Wildflowers game, where I really felt it was a watershed moment because it was the first time I ever worked on a mobile game and didn't have to worry about sample rate and could just go full console in terms of content and quality. So it's a massive moment for me. It was a really, really big thing.
That's a great segue into this question from Callum. What sort of audio quality is commonplace on mobile games now, as in sample rate and bit depth, and where do you see this going in the next few years?
That does actually relate to what I was just saying, because that game I was at 48 kilohertz and 16-bit everything. But on other games, still we're having to cut down on some stuff. It depends on the type of game.
Yeah, it depends, right? Yeah. So when we're writing stuff and exporting it out of our DAW, it's 4816, and then we let Fmod or Wise, whatever we're using, do all the work to do the compression rates for us. It's always a trade-off, right? It's between CPU and memory, what we want to do, but at the moment I think the normal human ear can't differentiate between what we're compressing to. I think we've got a nice balance at the moment. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but 44 or 48 still seems to be what we're putting into the devices now, because the compression rates in Fmod and WYs and the compressors and what they do in there are so good these days that you barely even notice. And in the future. Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw Meta have released those new glasses and they've got those new things that are coming out. I think we're going to be working in the 3D world and using binaural sound, but I think they'll still be quite niche. But until we get headphones that work in that space, so like just normal proper just in-ear headphones that you can get, I think when that happens, we can do full immersion, and we're already kind of working in there, almost wanting to get people into the headphone world, but I think at the moment most people can't tell the difference. I think we're at a good space.
Kat, what kind of technical specs were you working with for Gubbins?
I'm not sure.
You
actually.
don't remember.
I'm not sure. I was very, very lucky. I didn't have to I didn't have to deal with any kind of crazy limitations, thankfully. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
I love that. You're like, doesn't apply to me, none of my
Yes!
business. I just got to make nice music.
Yeah, pretty much. I was really lucky. I think Darcy and Jess were really, really supportive, and they were just like, just focus on the music.
Yeah.
So that's just what I did, yeah.
So what we're hearing here is there are options of ways that you can work, and if knowing the technical stuff is not your bag, maybe just work with amazing Melbourne indie devs making games like Gubbins.
Yeah, if you get a good audio director, they don't want you to worry about that. That's not your job. That's our job to worry about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Jacob would like to know, are there any particular considerations for developing for Apple versus developing for Android? Are there challenges for developing for both?
That's a good question, actually. The iOS is still the lead platform, so it's still regarded as the most important platform to kind of develop for. And Android sometimes gets tagged as the kind of secondary, not the also ran, but it's like secondary consideration. I think that's just usually down to just the sheer amount of installed user base. In terms of development challenges, a lot of the technical aspects of that are handled by the middleware solution that you're using. So something like Fmod will just build to Android in the same way that it will build to Apple devices. Sometimes though you get weird things where there may be just Android-specific bugs, and I think that's just where it's more of a programmer thing where they kind of identify why something's just happening on Android. But most mobile games, as far as in my experience, are released on both, unless you do have something like an Apple Arcade exclusivity thing where it's just on Apple. But for your usual third-party mobile game, both Android and iOS are still very important. And cross-development is often handled by your tools and middleware. At Playside, we're now using Fmod on all our mobile titles, which is a really great move because it just gives you that kind of solid foundation, knowing that a lot of the engine side stuff is taken care of, and things like Unity compatibility is consistent. And since we've made that switch, I've been really sort of happy with how we had that slight increased reliability by partnering with Fmod, who are obviously here this weekend as well.
if you haven't learned or know what Fmod is, it's incredible. We made the switch, and it handles exactly what I said. It does everything for us. We don't really have to worry about it. So I concur, I guess.
And if you would like to speak to our sponsors at Fmod, they are in the workshop on level 1, and you can head over there during the breaks. Noah would like to know, do you prioritize mixing for phone speakers or mixing for headphones, or do you aim for a midway point?
Well, I didn't mix the music. The engineer, Miles from Rolling Stock Studios, who recorded the music actually just around the corner, mixed it.
I have a really cool program, cannot remember off the top of my head, which you can just click of a button when you're going through your mix. You can A, B, C, D, all your mixes, through and make it sound like it's coming through headphones, make it sound like it's coming through. I'll remember it, so if you want to grab it off me, I'll let you know later. It's a really great piece of equipment. So
I was going to say, if you want to take a second to look it up, I think everyone would like to know.
yeah, I'll pass it on and then I'll look it up.
I like mixing on, I use an iPad sometimes and an iPhone just to kind of compare the difference with those handheld devices. And Apple AirPods, the older ones, I mean, they can be sort of like regarded as a means through which many players are going to be listening to something on an iPhone. So I think AirPods are an important one to check on for sure in terms of mixing. But in my studio, I've also got a pair of old Auratone little cubes. You know, those mid-rangey sort of, they're called horror tones because they don't have any bass and they're very present in their kind of mid-range. So you can get, that's quite a good way of mixing mobile games because you don't have the bottom end that you might have on headphones or other traditional speakers. And if something jumps out at you, it's likely to do it on those. So it's always good to mix it around a bit.
My process is I mix on the worst possible speakers that I can find.
Yeah.
And mono.
Sorry?
Mono. Always check your mixes in mono because, that's something that I find if I'm working with other artists and they'll bring it in and you mono their track and it's just like everything goes phased out because they've used something. So get used to mixing in mono as well, like a little mix cube or something. You're right, the most terrible speakers ever. And then if it sounds good on that, it probably is going to sound fine on everything else. I can't find that thing, sorry. It's a really great tool though. It's very easy to A/B it. And it also tunes... Sonarworks, that's what it is.
Thank you.
There you go, right at the back, Sonarworks. It's really good for tuning your room as well. So it's got a cool little microphone and you spend like 20 minutes just walking around your room with it and it tunes and does an EQ curve for your speaker system so it totally flattens your EQ curve in your room and then you can go through and set little presets to make it sound like headphones, make it sound like mix cubes or Yamahas or whatever you want. Basically you can plug it in. Also fantastic for headphones. If you're working in your headphones and whatever you're using, it has headphone presets in there and it can flatten your EQ response. So you're always getting the best representation of what you think it's going to sound like. And 9 times out of 10, you're safe.
Can you please put the name of that in Slido so that everyone can see it and get spelling and stuff? Thank you.
Thank you, good sir.
Do you have any considerations, Kat, with actually composing? Thinking about those different kinds of speakers and headphones that might be used.
Yeah, I did think about that, absolutely. We didn't incorporate drums for that reason. We've coming like umming and ahhing about it, but I thought maybe we can implement drums later or we can just opt out for percussion, so we did that instead. I thought that would be just like the range of like a shaker is probably going to kind of like come across in the mix, cut through, that's the word I was looking for, cut through in the mix a lot better, than like a snare or a hi-hat, so.
And I can also imagine if you're making music for, these kinds of audio sources, you maybe don't want to crowd the space either, you want to give it
absolutely.
More,
Yeah. So speaking about that, we had like multiple layers, so I had to create a track where there needed to be a second layer and a third layer kind of like jumping in on top of the foundation layer, which was really cool. I haven't done that before. So I had to constantly think about texture and space the whole time and think about the different timbres of the instruments. Yeah.
Nick would like to know, how do you avoid an audience tiring of your music and games with repetitive gameplay loops?
Oh, man. That's a great question.
Kat's like, take it back.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's difficult because obviously, like, you need variation. I was very lucky with Gubbins because I just had a lot of freedom to kind of play with stuff. So I created like 3 different sections. And then all of those sections have got variations that sit on top of that. But now when I listen to it, I really want to change some things. I really want to like add some stuff, and I really hope it's not tiring. So that's all I can say.
We have really started going into the generative or procedurally side of stuff to help with the ear fatigue, as we call it, by having, say, for example, you have a bass track, which would be a bass, I call it a bass track, we'll just have like a string section going along, but then we'll have an F-mod, we'll set up a instrument that will, multi-instrument, which will have like 20 or up to 20 different little melody lines that will trigger in this part of the track. And then we'll have another one that will trigger in this part of the track and trigger this part of the track. So when the track loops, you're constantly getting evolving melody lines and changing scopes of stuff. So you don't have that, get that ear fatigue. It's very important. It's actually one of our main pillars that we have now in Pickpock, is making sure that you don't have that ear fatigue, because people will just turn it off otherwise. And so the song is constantly evolving. It's still in the same world, it's still the same tone, it's still the same feel and boost, and so, but it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. We'll bring in a cello, and then but then that melody line will change, and it'll be the oboe that's playing it, or whatever it may be. So it's constantly evolving, and then we have intensity levels on top of that. So when you move up in intensity, it'll bring more percussion or more cello or more whatever you need to help boost to the energy, and if you want it down. So it's constantly evolving, set to parameters. So as a composer, my advice to you guys would be it's great to be a composer and write music and let the team handle it, but if you can take control of Fmod and then write directly using Fmod and using Fmod as your tool to be able to, kind of like Ableton, to be able to play it live, but you build the systems in Fmod, you will level up considerably as a composer, because you'll be able to build systems within your control, and you'll be able to build melody lines within your control, and just not have that ear fatigue. It's a fantastic tool, and it's almost limitless to what you can do with it. If you can imagine it, you can probably put it in there and do it. So yeah, that would be my advice is for composers out there. Just get hold of Fmod. It's free, you can download it and just write to it. Write in stems, build in layers, build in little melody lines, and really start thinking, and instead of a linear piece, start thinking as in 3D version of that.
Yeah, I think the original question relates to game music that composers have been sort of being challenged by for decades, like how to try and avoid repetitiveness in your game music when you're playing a game that can, go for many hours, in terms of how long a user's spending engaged with it. So as Jayde said, yeah, by using interactive music systems which are influenced by real-time parameters, you're going to help avoid repetition by having dynamic changing occur as the game progresses. And in the mobile space now, you're seeing fully interactive game scores as you would do on a console. So I think it's improving in that area. So by that mean, I'm doing a project at the moment where there are some parameters that maybe whether you're on combat or not, or what time of day it is, So as the game changes, the lighting will change as you go into night, and then the music will change underneath it. So it's because it's tied to game parameters, you help avoid that incessant kind of repetition, because it evolves as other things do.
Save your hooks too. Like if it's BGM or background music, don't put melody lines or hooks in there that are just going to constantly be getting earwormed into people's heads, because that will start getting annoying. So you want to use like more string orchestral stuff, and then save your hooks for moments. Save your hooks for like a certain area or something like that, a motif that will pop up and just come in and out when you need it. Otherwise, yeah, you'll create that ear fatigue.
Jayde, you said that ear fatigue was one of the pillars that you pay attention to. What are the other pillars?
Put me on. So a lot of it. So for us, our music has to also be a standalone, like that people will want to listen to it outside of the game. And a lot of music we write for our games and titles, that's kind of, we have that in mind. So if we're writing a theme song or something, it's also a theme song that you would hear in the real world. Like it'd be like a song that's somebody has written and we've chosen it to put to our game. For in-game music, so one of our pillars is making sure that it's not repetitive, that people enjoy it, that they can listen to it outside of the title. So yeah, I think that was one of the pillars for this particular title, that was making sure that we made it non-repetitive. So yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe if I look over at Brogan, she might be able to yell out some more pillars, but I preach them, but when I'm on stage, I forget them. That's right. AAA audio quality in mobile titles is give them a reason to turn their audio back on is one of our biggest ones, and that includes, so the music has to be at the level, the sound effects have to be level, the dialogue have to be at a level that you would go, hey, this works on AAA as well. Yeah.
And what does that mean? How do you make it at that level? How do you make it a AAA level? I'm being so annoying, I'm sorry.
No, make it good. No, so it's a lot of mobile titles, audio is an afterthought. And it's something that you listen to it and they'll just turn it off. People just turn it off because a lot of studios may have that mindset of nobody listens to it anyway, it doesn't matter. So for us, it's about getting it, because if you look at it as a scoring system, for example, you can add, say, you can make a 7 out of 10 game into a 9 out of 10 game because you have good audio. So people will like that. People will want to listen to it. I'm an audiophile. I love audio. So I've been preaching getting making audio into games at a level for a long time because, yeah, I have to speak carefully because there are titles, games out there that don't value audio like we do at Pickpock and like you guys at Playside. Yeah, they don't value it the same way that we all in this room do. And so as a sound designer, as an audio director, yeah, it's just, did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
Well, it sounds a little bit like be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Want to make it good and put in the effort.
Do the best you can.
Yeah.
Basically do the best you can. And
as an early thought, not as an afterthought.
Advocate at the start. So we often have our audio designers in pre-prod, which is rare in a lot of game development, and is having your sound designs components right in pre-production, which is at the start when the game's being developed, so that we can influence the game in a positive way with our audio as well. So we're collaborating and composing at the very start. So it's a very collaborative effort to try and get our audio and to a point where that the devs are excited about it themselves, that they want it to build, and it just builds a better experience in the entire title and the entire game because people are building the game are excited about the audio. It's not just an afterthought of, hey, we've built a game, put some audio to it. We're in there from day one. We call our audio designers audio ambassadors because that's what they are. They're an ambassador for our audio department, and they go into a team and they're there to wave that flag constantly. Like, we're here to make audio, we're here to help you and collab and make this an amazing experience. So that's kind of in our ethos there, is just building from the start and really just getting there from day one and getting people passionate about it, because a lot of people aren't like us, as you all know, the norms, as we call them.
Kat, what was the development process like for you? How did you work with the rest of the team? And when were you brought on?
So we started, I came into the team, it was early 2021. It was just, this was before we had the any of the animators and illustrators of the Gubbins, so it was quite early on. We just had our software developer, Darcy and Jess, and that was pretty much it. So quite in the early stages, yeah. The developmental process, we had a meeting, we had just had a lot of conversations about it. They were aware that I had never composed for a game before, and in fact that's why they wanted to ask me. So yeah, we were having a lot of conversations. There were a few times where I couldn't understand how the demo tracks were going to be implemented into the game. So getting through that nitty gritty was a little bit difficult, but we got there. So I started composing it on Logic, like I just mocked up demos, like I said, and we would actually just try playing the game with those demos first. Yeah, and then I notated the music later.
Was it a process by which you would kind of have those conversations of this is the type of game, this is maybe some concept artwork and what we're trying to do? Or?
Yeah. So Darcy and Jess are just really great communicators. They had a really strong vision, and Jess had like a really beautiful color palette, and I think that was so that was one of the inspirations. But they also were just explaining the vision to me, and they wanted it to feel warm. They wanted it to feel a certain way, and because they communicated it so well, and they just made it so easy for me to work with them. I think that's why there was like not so much anxiety, and I was able just to work. So, I'm very lucky.
Composing off vibes.
Pretty much. I was really, really lucky.
A question from Jose. Are you familiar with gacha games? Do you have any opinions on those types of games as audio designers? I'm not, so
I don't know what that is. No.
Yeah.
Yes. Gacha games, there's a lot of celebratory music when you're opening things, basically. So,
yes.
So it's like stuff like that. So you're writing lots of things like that. So little like 1 or 2 bar celebratory stuff. So the question was what the difference is, or
I archived it, sorry. Opinions on those types of games as audio designers, soundtracks, effects, etc.
Yeah. Basically when you're writing everything for that world, it really is writing like awesome celebratory music for little gacha moments, and it's actually quite a lot of fun because it's just how many times can I write this same celebratory sound in this key with these instruments 10 times, 15 times, so you don't get ear fatigue. So it's a great little thought experiment because you're writing a little celebratory stab that's 10 bars loop, or 10 bars with a loop that sits underneath it, and it's got to be all in key with your sound effects, because all your sound effects obviously got to be in key as well. So I actually really enjoy the process.
It is actually fun to do those sounds. I mean, you just, as that chest opens, the audio becomes a very key moment of that thing. I've gone through that process as well as of trying to kind of that's a real high impact moment. But that whole game style, how do you feel about doing the audio for it? I don't know whether that means sort of like how do you feel about working on a game with that type of monetization, because that's a really interesting question as well. Or how do you feel about just doing the sound for it? I mean, it's like it's an interesting space. I wouldn't want to be doing that all the time. No. Like in terms of just being a sound designer, I'd find that probably a bit samey, just doing that whole kind of thing. But, we've got to accept the fact of life that those kind of games there's a certain psychologically connection towards trying to keep people like hooked, or when I say hooked, attracted to the process, and sound does play a whole kind of key role in that, and it sort of goes back to that whole thing of sound effects for like pinball or other forms of game experience which use audio to draw attention to itself. So it's all an important part of the kind of user interface. Like it becomes like a UI sound, which is it's really important on mobile with UI as well, because everything needs to be very clear and to the point, and user experience and all that stuff becomes like a very interesting area for sound design. I think on mobile, traditionally having a slightly more limited palette in terms of frequency range and what have you, it's a good challenge where you just try and make a lot of sounds quite rounded off and quite that they're going to cut through. So as a sound designer, you have to kind of think more about what is not going to work as opposed to what does work, and work accordingly.
Have any of you played Vampire Survivors? It was only the best game of that year, but okay. It has one of the best chess sounds in a game, in my opinion, because it has different lengths of the theme that plays depending on how many items are in that chest for you. And I let the whole damn thing play out every time. And it must be quite fun as well to get to create little motifs and pieces that are just there to make you feel very good.
Yeah, we did a game years ago, Brogan and I, for Adult Swim, that when you win, there's a song that pops up, and it's called The Winniest Winner. And it's basically just Brogan singing, you're a winner, you're the winniest winner, you're so great, you're amazing, you're so good at pushing buttons really well, you're good at tapping the screen, like almost mocking them. But yeah,
that's my morning affirmations.
Yeah. So, because it was a Adult Swim game, they were like all over it. They loved it. And then when you lost, it was me singing it, and literally going, "You're a loser." But in a fun way, you did well. You can come back, you can try again, and it was a good game, and it was a lot of fun. So you can have fun with it, like adding little vocals and vocal stabs and stuff like that. Always add to that perceived level of quality as well. So having that little fun song that's saying you're a winner is great. And small note, T-Pain played it and he liked it and he tweeted it that he had that song on loop for about 5 minutes after he won this game.
Oh my gosh!
And then we hit him up and said, "Do you want to do a remix?" And he was like, "Oh, for sure," but it never happened.
Oh.
It was too expensive.
You should just circle back to that one. What kind of portfolio is required when applying for an audio designer role?
I guess I look at these a lot. Kind of portfolio. It's a good question because it's so varied amongst the people that come in and apply for a role. So, for example, we put out a sound designer role and we have 100 people apply within a week because there's a lot of people out there that want to get into this world. And you get varied from people that are composers from Lord of the Rings to people that make beats on Fruity Loops. And so what we're looking for in a portfolio is that you're just show us your work, show us your mahi, as we call it in New Zealand. Show us what you've been doing, and so do some game jams, get some titles under your belt, and then show us what you're doing. Join groups, come to things like this and meet us and join it. But looking for the portfolio is that I don't care if you got straight A's. I don't care if you've done, you're a straight A student, you've done all this. It really comes down to the quality of the work that you've done. And I like to, when I have a hiring process, I like to take people that what I call is an engineering mindset, which is if you don't know how to do it, you'll work it out. You'll go into it and go, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to try. I always tell this anecdote of Tim, who's was our technical sound designer, and he applied for a role at Pickpock, and he didn't know what F-mod was, but I really liked him as a sound. He came from a film background as a sound designer, and he joined the team. And then by the second interview, he had already sent me 2 links doing tutorials on how to do F-mod, and he sent them to me. And he said, "Hey, I did this," and he learned how to do it. And it was his engineering mindset that we like to call it, is that he didn't know how to do it, but he worked it out. So the biggest thing is that you can teach hard skills, but you can't teach soft skills. Or you can work on your soft skills. So soft skills for me is the biggest thing that we hire for culture. So coming in and talking to us and have a korero, have a conversation, and get to know us a bit more and talk to us, is that you'll kind of start looking. I know I didn't answer the question about portfolio, but it's not just about portfolio, it's about culture fit.
Well, I think there's a couple little things in that story as well, of it's not being afraid to show, hey, I may not know something straight away. Like, don't lie, because that also gives you the opportunity to show I can learn it. Yeah,
we have a what's called a fail culture at work. It's not that. It's like every morning we have a scrum and we talk about our wins, losses, and learnings. So it's normalizing failure, and because that's how we learn. We learn so much faster when we fail. So if you can normalize that culture. So yeah, you're right. It's coming in to talk about wins, learnings, or losses. So what'd you do today? I made an awesome soundtrack. What'd you do? I accidentally deleted the entire repository. What did you learn? Don't do that again.
I see quite a few applications as well, and I feel advice I'll give would be that a lot of people do redesigns. So you take a piece of footage from an existing game and you redo the sound design to it. Now, I think that's fine, it's good, but I like to see reels that aren't 100% made up of that. So by all means, do one redesign, but don't be afraid to send little sort of sounds in isolation and elements to sounds as well. So you might have created a sound which is made up of like 3 or 4 elements, and each of them has got randomized things, whether it's like footstep surfaces or whatever. Like, it doesn't. We like to see the ins and outs of an actual sound and how it's made up. So that's, you know, don't be afraid about sending little WAVs in isolation that you've designed. And also, UI sounds are really. I always love to see UI sounds in an application. So think about button presses and menu navigation and select sounds, because sometimes they can be harder to create than you might think, and that's really useful, especially in the mobile space, actually. And then the final thing I'd say is technical demos within Unity or Unreal or whatever you're using. If you wanted to kind of create a little audio test scene and show little things that you've set up, awesome, you know, show a little video capture of that. It doesn't have to look great, it just has to be that you're thinking about how authoring or how implementation has been set up. So yeah, variety is a good thing on a show reel for sure.
I've had people send me F-mod sessions, like entire F-mod sessions of what they've done, and that's cool too.
Yeah, I think that's cool too, yeah. Yeah, just zip it up and send it.
The one thing I'll add to that is, even though I'm the composer for Gubbins, if you are a composer and you haven't done sound design before, you might be lucky to work with people like Studio Foley, like Darcy and Jess, because they were like, actually, you know what, we know that you've never done sound design before, but we're going to give you a go. You can have a crack at it, basically. So there is opportunity for that to grow in that way. I just started experimenting. You know, I was figuring it out on my own. And we implemented some of the sounds I did. They went with a really, really fantastic, I'm pretty sure, indie company called A Shell in the Pit, who do sound design and music. And that's absolutely fine. I wasn't weird about that or anything. But like, that was really encouraging for me to be like, we believe in you. We think that you could probably figure this out, and we're going to help you and give you some resources. And you know, and I started to figure it out, and it was great. So, and that taught me a lot about myself and what I'm capable of too. So, yeah, don't be kind of restricted by limitations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's often when I talk at unis and composers come up to me and say, you know, what do I need to do to get into gaming? And if you've already got your composition down, it's like, learn sound design. It is quite important, because as if I was to contract somebody to come in, you actually would be what we call an audio ambassador. So you would have to handle the sound design as well. It's almost expected a little bit in the gaming world that you would be handling the sound design, and it actually helps you as a composer as well, because you're creating sounds that you want to fit into your compositional world. Otherwise, you'll just get like maybe you might get some coder sound, as we call it, which is just somebody just like throwing in whatever they want for their sound effects. So if you can learn sound design, and then as well, it gives you a leg up in the industry amongst other composers. But then also, if you learn sound design and a middleware program as well, like a DAW or Wise, then again, that's a leg up, because people, you know, as somebody who's hiring, where we go, oh, this person's kind of got a little full package, which is great. Yeah.
I love how there's a bit of an energy of be true to yourself, work to your strengths, and keep trying to expand and extend. But also, just because you do one part doesn't mean you have to do all, but it's a great skill to learn.
Yeah, it's growth mindset as well.
David would like to know, do you see a future for shipping mobile titles with binaural mixes and mix profiles a la theatre mode or tram mode in terms of sound mixing? Very Melbourne question. Trams?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that Apple have been pushing their spatial audio technology. I was asked to look at that a while back on a project, but I was using Wise, and Wise didn't actually support that workflow. But it's certainly becoming a thing for sure, and I reckon that there'll be more of that. Binaural profiles using customized profiles as well for users, and headphones are just such a great tool for immersion, such a great medium for getting a really immersive audio mix, and I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the case with mobile, because even though you're looking at a slightly smaller screen, there's still the ability there to get a super kind of like immersive reactive mix using binaural rendering or what have you. So yeah, I think there'll be a whole bunch more of that stuff coming down the pipe.
Well, we have time for probably one more quick question. Or more have come in. Now I've got to pick. Okay, we'll try and get two in. Do you have any mixing tips to create audio that sounds good on a range of mobile devices?
We talked a little bit about that before with mixing on different speakers. Obviously, the mid-range is key where everything's going to sort of live. So with speakers as well, not being able to kind of reproduce the same kind of quality as a full range speaker, you'll find that sounds which are kind of complex in their sort of waveform. Just think about a little speaker having to reproduce like a highly complex mid to high frequency sound with a lot of content. That's going to come out with a lot more challenge associated with playback when you compare that to, let's say, a well-rounded simple waveform from an analog synth, which is very, very easy to reproduce. So you can get, like, if you're thinking about your sound design from a synthesizer point of view, working with waveforms or sounds which are simple in their content will just translate beautifully on mobile speakers and devices with restricted frequency range reproduction.
I think it harks back a bit as well to what Kat was saying earlier with composing and maybe allowing things to breathe and to be a little bit more simple and accepting that you don't have to put in everything. It's okay to let it be a little bit more pared back in order to be better for the medium that you're working with. And last question, how do you advocate to a studio that audio is important and shouldn't be an afterthought? How do you convince devs to let you make music that people want to turn on? How do you fight?
Crowbars, normally, and big flags. And no, I've often used to threaten people like walking around with a bullhorn, just walking around the games. But no, it's for us. It was very much just building relationships with them and just getting to know them on a human level. There's no us and them. It's just we're all in here to do it together. And working with your POs, working close with your designers, and building allies within the team, and just talking to them as a human being and being on the floor with them. Get out of your studio, go talk to them, hang out with them, build those relationships, get them to want to support you and to work and think for you. And because if you got allies in the team that go, hey, this is a really cool idea, what do you think like this? And then you can just synergy of that. And so yeah, so how to get in early, talk to them early, build relationships. It takes time. It can be frustrating because they do put up walls sometimes, but due to deadlines or whatever it is. But fight your battles, choose your battles to fight hard, and then eventually they'll just start turning around if you keep delivering and saying, this is what we're doing. That's just build that trust over time, and it'll happen. It takes a while.
Fight with kisses, not punches.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us and for sharing all of your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.